Welcome to the Superpowers for Good show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe, and today I'm excited to have with us Richard Buday, who is the founder and president of Archimage. He's a remarkable architect who has done amazing, interesting, of all things, video gaming. So this is going to be a fascinating conversation. You don't want.
Devin, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. This is going to be a great conversation. Uh, Give us a little bit of an overview of your remarkable career. It's just so hard to connect the dots in my mind
Yeah,
between an architect and a video game developer, and yet that's kind of how your career evolved. How did that happen?
it was a strange confluence of events, and I've often had this explanation, this discussion with other architects who say, "Richard, it looks like you're having a lot of fun, but it's not architecture." In fact, it is architecture. Um, but the short answer to how we got here is that my firm began in 1983 under another name. We were early adopters of computers. At that time, it was computer-aided design or computer-aided drafting. And we were just coattailing onto the what was called the computers and architecture revolution at the time. And as we were early adopters, we were getting the attention of new software companies, one of which was Autodesk. We knew the original founders of that company. And we became early alpha and beta test sites for a lot of their products, including their animation software. So one thing led to another, and 20 years into our almost 40-year history, we were doing video games. That's the short story. But it's still architecture. Everything that we've done, that I've done, even if it's a video game, we treat as an architectural project. We may be creating environments that you navigate through virtually, but they're still the same kind of built environments they would be if they were a physical environment.
Yeah, it really is fascinating work that you're doing, and some of those video games had some significant purpose. Some of what you developed were games that were designed to help young people, kids, teens, uh, adults, and families. So I think you even had one for single parent moms in the African American community that was kind of targeted at to help them be more healthy. That is such an interesting path for an architect. How did you end up doing that remarkable work?
Well, again, it was one of these, serendipitous sort of opportunities. Some researchers at Baylor College of Medicine, just down the road from us here in Houston, got wind of the work we were doing for computer graphics or in computer graphics. We were doing television commercials. We had done some work with Disney. They got word of us and asked if we could help them finish. At that time, they were doing multimedia behavioral interventions. They didn't call them computer games, but they were behavioral interventions for children targeting improved physical activity and dietary behaviors. They asked if we could help them finish a project, and we said yes, and we became basically fast friends and collaborators for another 15 or 20 years. Eventually doing true personal computer and then eventually um, iPad or iPhone games, but all of which were what the genre is called serious video games or games for change. So the idea was to use immersive technology uh, to help persuade people to lead more healthful lives. And in the case you mentioned about the game for moms, we were targeting not African American per se, but any all demographics of single parent moms who were having trouble with a young child who was not eating or exercising properly, and it was a parent training video game basically. But that's how it came to be.
It's such interesting work. As uh, one of the things that is remarkable is you and I have been chatting a little bit before this. We've had a couple of conversations. It seems to me that as you reflect on your career in architecture, you've evolved some of your thinking from when you were actively in the process of building buildings. Tell us a little bit about how you reflect on the role of architecture in society and the work that architects are doing today, uh, and how that may have evolved over your career.
One of the take homes that I took home from my work with researchers at Baylor. These were behavior scientists. These were psychologists, in addition to other, nutritionists and other specialties and subspecialists. But the take home that resonated to me was a psychosocial theory of behavior based on how stories shape what we think and do as a person. There's a theory of behavior called narrative transportation theory. You can Google it. It's a fascinating and interesting sort of topic. But as we were weaving narrative transportation theory into the serious games we were developing, it seemed to me that they were quite applicable to normal physical architecture planning and design. And that's what I've been trying to do since Archimage effectively closed as a design studio. I've been writing about how to apply narrative transportation theory to buildings in the hope of reestablishing architecture as what Victor Hugo once called, the author of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the great book of humankind. There was a time when buildings were storytelling devices. They were the world's first mass communication medium. People came to buildings as much for stories that were carved, embedded, and contained within them as for basic shelter. We've lost that as a profession, as the architectural profession over many years, to the point where most buildings are now meaningless to people. And I think if architects were more aware of narrative transportation theory, they would be able to produce buildings that were more socially meaningful.
Interesting. It's a fascinating, way to think about things. Now, you do a lot of writing now, and I have to admit that one of your pieces really caught my attention, and you and I chatted about this a little bit, and we could talk about this for hours. But after the I'm forgetting the suburb, but the Miami area tower, the condo tower fell. Yeah. You wrote an interesting piece, and I think you have lived for some years in a condo project. I've lived almost, I would say 60-70% of my life in condos. I live in a condo now, and especially in a high-rise context. And I lived in a high-rise for 20 years, a high-rise condo. You see a fundamental problem that I think is kind of scary. Tell us a little bit about your take on that, because it's just, It's a fascinating situation.
Well, I wrote an article called Condocide, Death of a Building Type. Now we're moving away from video games. We're just talking about, but we are talking about behavior. And there are some psychosocial theories of behavior that I see coming into play in the operations of an old or an elderly condominium building. And I'm sitting in one right now. This is my home. But what happened to the building that collapsed in Florida a little over 2 years ago, I think now, was that the homeowner association board basically did not act quickly enough on the recommendations of the structural engineers to prevent the collapse. And there are multiple reasons, I think, in a psychologist's perspective, why they could not get their act together. They could not convince themselves as a board, nor the homeowners, of the need and the expense in a timely fashion. And I see this happening in my building, and I think if you read online, certainly many articles that came after the collapse of that tower have shown that most condominium association boards have trouble dealing with big expenses, justifying them getting them past homeowners. And it's a real problem. And I'm of the opinion that, and the reason I called the article condo side, is that most aging condominiums will not be able to do the kind of maintenance and raise the funds required to do the kind of maintenance that elderly buildings, especially high rises, require to live past 50, 60 years, which is the average length of time high rise buildings exist in the United States before they either require a major renovation, something nearly half of what the original building cost when it was constructed, or they're torn down and something else is put in place. So I think the future of high-rise condominiums in this country is rather bleak at this time.
Yeah, it is scary. And having lived in a high-rise condo myself, I recognize all the hazards you're talking about. It's so difficult to get a group of homeowners to assess themselves sufficiently for the maintenance and the big repairs that are periodically needed. It's very, very difficult. Like you say, it's a psychosocial dynamic that works against the success of the project. And it's just a fascinating thing to think about.
Now, on the upside, I will say that I think my particular building has the potential, because of the fact of other circumstances, not because of the of board dynamics, but I think we have other things working in our favor, including location, that might allow us to gain the funds necessary to do the big work coming up at the appropriate time. It's not a given, but I think in many ways we are in a better position than some of our contemporaries are in other parts of the country to withstand what's coming down the road. So this is why I'm still here.
Yeah, it is interesting. Well, listen, everybody, we're here with Richard Buday today, and he is an extraordinary architect and video game developer, fascinating career. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Richard about his superpower. You don't want to miss this, so stick around.
Ever wonder if you can raise money with a community round on WeFunder? It may not be as tricky as you think. You can start right now. Start in under 2 minutes. Visit wefunder.s4g.biz or scan the QR code to begin. Give it a try.
Want to learn from the world's great changemakers? Find your superpower. Subscribe to the Superpowers for Good newsletter at superpowersforgood.com. Make your strengths into superpowers that will change the world. Join the super crowd today. Superpowers4good.com. Join us at Supercrowd Baltimore to connect with community-focused business leaders and investors working to support diverse founders, social entrepreneurs, and community builders. Learn how to raise money from the crowd and how to invest like a pro. March 21st at the B&O Rail Museum. Register today at thesupercrowd.com.
Well, welcome back, everyone. We are here with Richard Buday, and we're having just a fascinating conversation with him. Super accomplished entrepreneur, architect, video game developer, social change maker, writer, author, just a fascinating guy. I wish we had all day, but we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk to Richard about his superpower. Richard, you really have accomplished a lot. Just an amazing career and just some extraordinary diversity of things that you've been able to do and connect. What do you see as your superpower?
I would, it's a good question. It's a funny topic. I mean, it's a funny word to apply to something that has propelled at least me through my career trajectory. But I would say it's the ability, and it's not just me. I think most architects are trained to do two things. One is the obvious. We are trained in deductive reasoning, and which most people are, but it's sort of an overt training that happens in architectural school to look at a problem study different solutions. You could do it this way, you could do it that way, and then deduce the best solution to the problem, and that's deductive reasoning. But we are also trained, and this is what I have used, in what is called inductive reasoning. And in inductive reasoning, what happens is that you're given a solution, and you say, now what problem can I solve with this? And that's upside down thinking to a lot of people. But it's basically what we've been able to do. What I've done it with every new technology that's landed on my desk, I pick it up and go, wow, I don't know what the heck to do with this, but I'm going to try to find something. And that has led us to all these different directions that you're describing. The curiosity and the opportunities that inductive reasoning will take you.
Yeah, that is a really interesting superpower. And I don't know that I've ever had I guess, there are some themes that develop as I talk to hundreds and hundreds of people about their superpowers. And I think that's the first time I've heard that kind of response. As you think about your abilities in that way, what would you say is an example of how you might have overcome a challenge, faced a challenge and overcome it using that particular superpower?
Well, that's something I have to think a little bit on. I think all of the computer animation we've done, we were early adopters of microcomputers in architecture, which got us all kinds of odd commissions, including doing station identification graphics for local television commercials. We were working on Buena Vista's work for Walt Disney. And of course, Disney has its own animators, but we were brought in because we had an architect's eye that we could apply to the animation that was needed for those kinds of projects. But our whole path from standard architectural planning and designing, working with buildings and interiors, to virtual environments, cities, societies living inside of a computer, came about because we were trying to find ways to apply our new technology to new kinds of projects. And after a while, we started thinking along those lines. We had a tagline to the firm for many years called "Designing What's Next." And that basically spoke to the idea that we were trying to get ahead of the curve and design it before many times we knew exactly how best to employ it.
Yeah. It really is remarkable how you were able to do that. Just such a leading edge player in so many different aspects of technology implementation and advancement. So it's really cool to think through that. If you were trying to coach someone to develop that skill, to be able to apply that in their own lives, in their profession, in their work, what would you coach them to do to develop that ability?
Well, I think inductive reasoning is a skill set that you can learn. I'm sure one could Google and find, some kind of ideas on how to sort of draw that talent out of you and how to practice it. So that is something I think any inquisitive mind would latch onto pretty quickly. I would say also that if your desire is to change the world in some small ways, and you need to do that by changing what people think and do. And of course, you don't have to be looking at this from a society improvement perspective. You could be looking at this as a marketing and sales perspective, because advertising companies are very much aware of what people think, how to shape what people think and do. So you can look at it from a business sense. But the power of narrative persuasion, narrative transportation theory, is a very, very powerful tool that can be used for both good and bad. And I would suggest that people who are looking really to make an impact on people study narrative transportation theory. It was developed, or it was sort of authored by Melanie Green and a person by the name of Brock, who's sadly passed away. But I think it's one of the most important avenues of potentially doing good for society that we have in front of us that really no one knows about except creative writers, except the novelists, the people who know how to spin a yarn, how to tell a story. They understand what psychologists have documented here, and they know it intuitively. But for everybody else, I think it's really worth a study.
Yeah, that's great counsel. Great counsel. Richard, you've done so much, but some of your work today is really focused, I think, on writing. Tell us a little bit about how people can track down the things that you're writing these days, so that they can read some of the things I've read about that you've written recently that are really fascinating.
Well, I mean, most of my architecture-themed articles that are connected to my belief in narrative transportation theory. I sort of coined a banner called persuasive architecture, architecture that does more than shelter, but architecture that persuades people toward an improved behavior of some kind. I've been publishing a lot on a website called commonedge.org. And if you scroll through the articles of commonedge.org, you will find my name. And if you click on my name, you'll get a list of all the articles that I've written for that publication. But there are other places, archdaily.com. I've written for, the glossies, the architectural journals, Texas Architect, Progressive Architect in its days, Progressive Architecture in its days. But probably the place to go these days would be commonedge.org.
Well, fantastic. As we wrap up here, I wonder if you just take a minute and tell people how they can otherwise learn more about your work and connect with you to explore opportunities, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I mean, our website, archimage.com, is sort of a historical look at the work we've done over the years. There's a nice Wikipedia entry on the firm. If you just look under Archimage in Wikipedia. If you just Google my name, Richard Buday, you'll probably find all kinds of references to work and or articles. And if anybody really wants to contact me or talk about this, I'm happy to chat at any time. Just write to me at rbuday@archimage.com and I will respond. And I'm always happy to talk to interested folks.
Well, Richard, we really thank you for taking the time to be with us today, and really want to commend you for the extraordinary career that you've had, and wish you continued success as you continue to be a thought leader in across a spectrum of issues, but especially in the world of architecture. We want to see you continue to succeed and help shape the world in positive ways.
My pleasure, Devin, and thank you very much for having me.
All righty. Now, let's do some good.